Dude, I've been having such a horrible week. Like, first of all, my dog ran away at the beginning of the week, and ever since, like, we haven't been able to find her, and it's been so cold and rain.
So, you guys know what my Roman Empire is? Income discrepancies in education.
You've been thinking about that? What is that?
Yeah, I've just been thinking about like how people of lower income don't have as many research opportunities. They have to spend more time maybe working a job or worrying about income for their family rather than experiencing higher levels of education, experiencing extracurricular activities. They don't get as much time to study, things like that.
Oh yeah, I think going off the first few points you listed, like they have all these commitments to their actual personal lives, like
Exactly.
supporting their family, such that they don't have enough time to study for school maybe.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really quite sad.
Yeah, and that just makes it harder for them to, like, eventually break out of this cycle of, like, poverty, right? Because they don't have this, like, opportunity to leave as easily.
Oh yeah, it's really like you're born, support your family, you probably won't get into a good college, well, for most people, and then have kids. Yeah, maybe you're not working a high salary job. Your kids need to support the family, and
It's
so on and
this
so forth.
never-ending cycle. Of
Yeah,
poverty.
but I think recently, like people have been trying to break that, and they've been
Exactly,
successful.
Good.
No, but yeah, there's been a lot of movements, and people are getting better at resolving issues like this, which is awesome because that means less people are going into poverty, which means more people have access to these educational opportunities.
Because they are talented, except
Exactly.
they don't have these opportunities to showcase their talent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like Questbridge, right?
Yeah,
That's a
exactly.
good example.
People getting into these top colleges.
Yeah, I think
people
it took like 3 people from MIT from a local
Yeah,
high
high
school.
school.
I think
Crazy.
the race. Okay, so recently there was that. Wait, what was it called? The
Questbridge?
no, like the
The
thing
one
where
with
affirmative
Harvard.
action.
yeah, affirmative action. Affirmative action got like
Oh yeah.
Bye-bye.
got thrown out, and it was a race thing before, and people were pretty mad about that. But I think a race before it was pretty important because not to generalize, but let's say most impoverished people are of a certain race versus more like high income white people like investment bankers or like doctors or Asians that have gone to the US and worked really hard.
Yeah.
And like these are all high income versus low income. Like not a generalization, but there are certain races that are more
Exactly.
impoverished.
Yeah.
And that affirmative action really helped them have a chance to get into these top colleges and break out of the cycle.
Yeah, kind of give everyone an equal playing field.
But then it kind of turned into
Yeah, well,
disadvantages for people.
it's true. But
Sure,
There's pros and cons to everything.
There's a lot of like programs out there which like provide opportunities for these low income students, right?
yeah, like so many summer programs.
Exactly,
Like only
yeah.
it's like only minorities.
Exactly.
Like mites for MIT.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't work if they can't find them.
Yeah, a lot of people, their priority isn't really finding them, right? It's like, oh, I got to provide for my family, work these jobs.
But those talented kids who are in these low income families, they're driven to succeed. They find these programs,
exactly.
and it's like it's an incredible step up.
Exactly. Or
Yeah.
they like hear about these programs, and it's a great opportunity for them. So this reminds me of a paper that I was reading the other day. Poverty impedes
Cognitive
function. You guys have heard of it?
Yeah,
I've seen that one!
I read that a couple months ago, but I kind of forgot what it was about.
Oh, it
Can
makes
you
sense.
remind me?
Yeah, of course. So basically, what they did was they had these two groups of people, one of high income and one of low income.
Yeah.
I believe the low income were these sugarcane farmers from India.
Oh, really?
And so basically what they did was they conducted these two types of tests on them. One was called the Raven's matrices test, which is kind of like a regular IQ test of sorts, kind of just measuring like critical thinking, things like that, like abstract thinking skills. The other was a cognitive control test, which was basically they were given like a scenario, and based off of that, like a scenario with a prompt, and then based off of that, they were supposed to like, I guess, form some sort of plan or resolution with a goal in mind to kind of like solve a specific task that they were given.
Yeah.
So like a creative problem solving type of test, right? You're given a scenario, you got to figure out what to do.
Yeah, like critical
Makes sense,
thinking.
yeah.
Critical thinking, yeah, that one was more like logical rather than abstract.
Okay.
So that makes sense, right? And so basically what they found was that in a lot of these scenarios, the farmers or like the poor income people in this scenario actually performed a lot worse. And they found that it was because they were distracted by their financial situation, right? That's just the burden and the stress of, oh, I have to worry about this money that I'm making, whether my harvest will yield enough money to feed me and my family, send my kids to school. That was actually impeding their cognitive function because they were so busy worrying about that they couldn't actually think properly, especially in these cognitive control tests.
That makes sense. I feel like So when I first read this, I was very confused because I was like, this is kind of circular reasoning. Like, these people are poor, so they're dumb, which makes them poor.
Okay.
That was kind of what I was getting from that paper.
But no, it's not really.
I feel like it's more like that hierarchy. What is it called? Like Maslow's.
Maslow's hierarchy
Yeah,
of
Maslow's
needs.
hierarchy. So like these people, impoverished people, they're on like they're still fulfilling like the lower levels of the hierarchy. So they can't put like their cognitive function towards like maybe the higher level things.
Exactly.
Like,
Pursuing like other interests
Or
and
education
yeah,
or degree.
further
But I think
education.
still inherently these tests are designed not to test like obviously if you give a PhD student a test versus a high schooler, the PhD student will do better on like a given test. But these tests were designed more like an IQ test
Exactly,
where
yeah.
it's
The
like problem solving and you don't need to have like
So it's
that
not really
level of
something you can
knowledge.
study for, or more knowledge
Exactly.
won't necessarily make you better. It's
So
kind of
which
just
is why I thought maybe the study design like yeah, sure, they're taking care of their basic needs, but that shouldn't it's not like making them dumber in sort of like
It's a
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
a distraction.
yeah, it really is. It's just like mental real estate being taken up by the fact that they're like struggling in their own lives.
Mental
that's
real
true.
estate.
Like they can't concentrate.
Like
as
think
much.
about like if you're like stressed about something else and you're trying to take a test, right?
oh yeah,
Yeah, it's all
like-
you can think
Yeah,
about.
it's all you can think
Yeah,
about.
True.
You're trying to
That
focus in
makes sense.
class and
Yeah.
you can't because you have a test next period, like something like that. That's
Especially if it's such like a bigger deal. Like a test is like okay, whatever, it's gonna be over soon. But these people like, oh, this harvest like makes or breaks their next year or
Exactly,
something
yeah.
like that.
True, yeah.
So I'm sure it's a lot bigger of like a stressor in their lives.
It
and
is, yeah.
unlike a test where it's like you're the one impacted, it could be their entire family.
It is their entire family. Yeah, they have to worry about whether they can feed their family, send their kids to school, things like that.
Yeah. So in their study, they did a variation of the experiment where
Yeah.
they provide like a financial incentive. Can you go more into that?
Yeah, so basically, the variation was that if they did better on the test, they'd actually get some sort of like money from it.
Yeah. Right. And how do these change the results? Basically, like did that incentive?
That actually, I don't think it did actually, or like provided worse.
I thought it made the
conditions.
disparity even more extreme.
Yeah, it made it because they were like, oh, like
stressed
real,
about-
Even
yeah,
more
they're now
work, like,
stressed
I
about.
need
it.
They're like, I need the money.
Yeah, I
Oh,
need
Oh,
this
that's
money.
like testing
so true.
anxiety.
Exactly,
Right?
yeah, they're
If
like-
you go into a test, you're like, I need to get a 91 on this test to make an A in this cycle.
Yeah,
And then you get like,
because like they have this opportunity to make money, but then if they don't do well, then they won't make the money. Like, oh my god, I have to do well so I
Yeah.
can be.
I guess that validates why stress is a mechanism.
Exactly, like if you've like ever taken a test, you have like an 89 in a class, they bump it up to a 90, and like,
True. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all
the
the
stakes are a
pressure.
lot
Yeah,
higher.
more pressure. It's
Yeah, so they had the regular condition, and then they had the financial incentive,
And they had another one.
a third one. This one was a little bit weirder. They basically, I think this is focused more for the cognitive control test, but basically, the cognitive control test, how it works is they provided like a scenario, right, like a prompt,
Yeah.
and then after that they're given like, okay, this is what you have to do, or come up with a goal, right? And so I think they were given time between kind of the prompt and then the actual like their line of reasoning, like actually trying to solve it, right?
so
Yeah.
they like got more time to like think
Think
about
about it, yeah. Which I think it made things worse actually, because then they're like even more the stress just kind of build it up.
Well, you would think that they have more time, so it's like less pressure.
But like I guess like when you
I
know
feel
they're
like-
gonna come out, it's like sit and simmer for a while. Like it gets worse.
Yeah. I
and
guess,
especially
yeah.
because a lot of these prompts were actually financially based. Like these prompts were fine. Like these prompts were like for the cognitive controls. They basically gave like a financial scenario, and so that made them like, oh my god, this financial scenario. It's reminding me of my own life, my finances.
Okay, that makes
it.
sense. Yeah.
So like if someone was like, oh, someone suddenly got a heart attack and you send them to the hospital and you have like a bunch of bills.
Bills, yeah. Like,
What
oh,
are you
what are you
gonna
gonna
do?
do? Exactly.
So
Something
the more
like that.
time they spent thinking about it, the more stress they got.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh,
It's a
okay,
lot
I
of
see.
financial prompts,
Yeah.
which they used. So obviously the rich people did better. They didn't have to worry about as much. They're like, okay, I'll just do this. I don't really,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even so, like while I was reading through this paper, after those three figures for the experiment, I was still a little doubtful. But there was that one last figure that actually validated, stress might be the causing factor for this education disparity versus maybe like rich people. As we said before, they have higher access to education.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the confounding factor. But there was that one.
Yeah, especially
last
because these
figure.
tests don't even require any sort of like prior knowledge or things like that.
like if you took a course in school.
Yeah, exactly. It won't help you at all.
I thought it was interesting because they gave like two variations of each test, right? The easy and the hard version.
Yeah.
And in the easy version, the poorer group did the same as the richer group, and then it's only when like things got more difficult and probably would like take more like brain power and like and then you start thinking of the stress that like when that disparity became president
Yeah.
in the group. So I thought that was
And
interesting.
they also did it for like the since they were farmers, right? For like the low income group, they took the test pre-harvest season and then post-harvest season, right? So pre-harvest season, obviously they're worried about, are my crops going to do good? Is it going to be a drought? Or, am I going to get the yield that I want? Post-harvest, they're a little bit more relaxed, which is why they did better.
Do you think it matters like if the farmer had a good yield?
I think
versus
so,
didn't?
because then
Because then it's like, oh, there's so much pressure, I have to do better this year, or it's like,
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah, I feel like, let's say that farmer, they were stressed before pre-harvest, and then they did do bad. Like, I'm sure they would be
that's even worse.
more
Like, oh
stressed,
my
and they would
god, like
perform even worse.
Did they
right?
differentiate that in the study?
I don't
feel
think
like
they
that
did differentiate it.
But
They
that
just-
makes sense because
that does make sense, yeah. Because if
like-
they had like a bad year, then obviously now they're really worried about, oh, how am I gonna afford all these things?
But in general, like having at post-harvest, like there's less burden on
Yeah,
their shoulders,
exactly.
so
They don't
they
have to worry
performed
about.
better.
Yeah.
I think for me, this figure is really what solidified the results of the experiment, because in a well-designed experiment, there's only one factor that you're changing that you can validate as like the causation.
Exactly.
Before it was like rich and poor, maybe like there were
Yeah,
different
there's a lot of-
circumstances,
yeah,
but this
exactly.
is literally the same person, just two different time points.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And the results were extremely
yeah.
significant.
Do you think they changed the test? Like, does it matter that they have
They,
already done it?
I think I'm sure it's the same type of test. I mean, I think they gave the same
Yeah.
test, but they might also have just not known what was the right one because these are kind of open ended. Or at least the
Oh,
cognitive
and they
control
probably didn't
was.
give like, oh, here's your review.
Yeah, they
This is
probably
what
didn't
you
give
got
the
wrong.
results.
Yeah.
As if you look at these like IQ tests online, like you don't really like. Sometimes you can tell whether you got them right or wrong, but other times it's like, what? So to wrap up the study, basically the significance of it was that they showed another reason for why people of lower income are actually affected, like in terms of cognitive function. Instead of like how we were discussing, like maybe it's a lack of opportunities, things like that, but instead it's actually the burden of what's going on in their lives and that their mental real estate basically being taken up by their like financial burdens, which
Real
is
estate, good pun.
yeah, mental state. For they basically showed that that's the reason why their cognitive function is being affected, and not necessarily maybe their opportunities that they have access to. And I think that we should, or at least in the future, policymakers and people like that should focus on how can we alleviate this burden from them rather than how can we provide opportunities to them. Because there's no point in providing all these opportunities if they're too busy thinking about what's going on in their lives.
Because then they can't make the best use of them.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think a main question in science is like, how does this apply to us, the people reading
Exactly.
the paper?
It's interesting because, like, I mean, anyone can be under like a super stressful like mindset and stuff, and it reminds me how people always say like, oh, don't make rash decisions when you're like stressed. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
'Cause-
You might do
Your
worse.
cognitive function is literally impaired.
Yeah, as we said before, like testing anxiety, performance anxiety for musicians, they're both very big things.
Yeah, or even in like a school setting, like students not performing as well because maybe they're worried about their other classes, maybe like internship opportunities, their work outside of school, extracurriculars, test scores, SAT, college admission, things like that.
Yeah.
Parental
Parental
stress.
pressure, exactly.
I think recently the stress that a high schooler or like teenagers undergo has increased
it's
exponentially. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. Social media, I think people exercise less, so then they don't get like extra endorphins and stuff. And it's, in like social scenarios, everything's like so different than it was
Exactly.
decades ago.
Yeah, good old days.
So,
Yeah, you would know, right?
Yeah, in my personal experience.
See, like I was saying, I think people should really focus on how can we alleviate this burden from these like high schoolers and other students rather
Treat
than like
mental health.
treat mental health by alleviating this kind of weight upon their shoulders rather than maybe trying to give them the opportunities or like things of that nature.
Yeah, I think the really just big takeaway here for us, stress impedes cognitive function.
Exactly.
So
Treat
mitigate
stress.
stress, we do better in school.
Yeah.
How
Or
we-
whatever.
Which is
you-
hard to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
And there's so many factors affecting the high scholar's life.
In my personal experience, stress builds up. So like, if I'm stressed about a test and I'm stressed about getting my homework done, and then I'm stressed about like college applications, and I'm stressed about like a piano competition, and like it builds up. And so I think by kind of like getting rid of as much as you can, like you don't, if you're not stressed about making dinner, then that makes things better.
Yeah.
And like just try to like take things one step at a time, put
Exactly.
in perspective.
Yeah, like a more distributed.
Yeah.
Approach.
it's
instead of
not
having-
worth pulling an all-nighter for a test where you can just get a good night's rest and really attack it next day.
Yes.
Yeah.
Get sleep.
I always have like a cutoff. Like I am not, no matter how like little I've studied, like
Yeah.
I am not studying anymore after this time.
Yeah.
Or I'm not working anymore after this time.
What's your cutoff?
3, 2.
Bruh.
2-1.
I usually pick 2.
I set mine at like 1 or 2.
Yeah,
Mine's
but after
a
that,
lot.
it's like I know I'm not gonna like wake up in
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And I mean, studying past like 3 is not gonna.
Also, yeah, you just don't.
At
remember
some
anything.
point, it's just like
It's just.
Well, unless you're doing busy work, like that's
Yeah.
another. If you're like, oh, I didn't do work for a week. I have all these assignments.
Yeah,
Maybe
busy
you
work
can
you
do
can
it.
stay up, but like studying where you actually need to like
like,
remember
think
information.
about it, like focus. Yeah.
Yeah.